The first one is the GSU study that we were sent, and we have looked through some information and sent it to the Social Services Committee to research to see if it's something that we can start. Is there anything you want to add to that, Wayne? You're on mute.
Not really. The study, first of all, I didn't see the full study, just some extracts of it, and it appeared to be a very comprehensive study. And I think before we decided on legislative action, it seemed appropriate to ask social services to look at the study, to look at what we're doing as in our system of services practice, and then to make any recommendations for action for us. We generally are much more, because of limited time, reactive in reacting to specific legislative proposals or reacting to the suggestions of other committees. And we're in partnership with other committees. So it seemed like an appropriate way to route that.
Okay. Thank you. And then the House Bill 41, Janice Tidwell had recommended that we take a look at that, and you did. Do you want to express any information on that one?
Briefly, that bill is very, very comprehensive in addressing access to health care for the entire state of Georgia. It has multiple components. It's being proposed by a Democrat, which in our General Assembly means that it's less likely to be brought for consideration. It seemed to impact many of the same issues that were addressed in dealing with surprise billing, and there were many heavy hitters in that. So long story short, I don't think the bill will be going anywhere. I don't think that it warrants comprehensive analysis at this point. If at some point it began to get some legs and we're called for a hearing, we may look at that, but it seemed to be more broadly addressing the entire healthcare system than any specific things that relate more directly to our business.
Okay, thank you. And the administrative salary study, any update on that?
Yes, two things. The OFI committee is working with the division on some facets of the salary study there. We pulled that to the front of the line because the division was interested in looking at OFI positions in general. I have pulled both of the administrative reports, and Vicki, I want to thank you and Darby in particular for your excellent work. I'm sort of putting that ahead of social services, since social services was upgraded a few years ago, and I don't think that information has changed dramatically. But long story short, I should be able to finish my work on the analysis of the administrative components by probably Wednesday of next week. I'm working a very limited schedule, but that's sort of at the top of my list. And I did get it started. I was very impressed by the quality of the research that each of you had done.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. And then we had a conversation about the etiquette, the do's and don'ts of, where are the lines when it comes to how much you can advocate or engage in political activity and using state equipment or wearing state paraphernalia while you're talking about things or whatever. So would you elaborate to the group kind of in a nutshell, kind of the lines that we need to stay in when it comes to that kind of thing?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And one of the things I think is important, it's always important for us always to ask questions and to be comfortable. I'd like to start with what we should be doing as professionals in our association, as professionals who are committed to making things better for the people that do this work. We have an obligation to make sure that our systems work well. We have an obligation to look at proposed changes to those systems, to propose changes to the budget, to assess the impact of that on our colleagues, and to be very aggressive in making sure that our systems are strong and make sense for the public. And so all of that activity is something that we've done for the past 50 years, and actually probably going back to 1951 when county directors formed an association. So that's what professional associations do. It's a wonderful thing for the legislative committee to be doing. And I don't think anybody could be critical of our work as an association to make sure that things work well and efficiently on behalf of the citizens of the state. So all of that, I think, should be strongly encouraged. Where we get into lines that we should not cross, the brightest one is that we are not paid by our system of service to advocate with the General Assembly. Each of you is employed has a job to do. You know what that job is. It's in your performance expectations. You talk about it every day and do amazing work in that regard. So what we should not therefore use state time or equipment to reach out to legislators to attempt to influence legislation. So that's the brightest line that's out there of should not do. At the same time, as a citizen of the country, you have free speech rights. You have a right to speak your mind. There are things related to the Hatch Act that you shouldn't do. You can't go out and campaign for candidates, but you have every right to call up your representative and establish a good relationship with them and say, I work for Family and Children's Services or Human Services. I'm proud of the work that we do. This is an issue that's important to us, and I hope you'll give us some consideration. That on your own time and equipment is part of being a good citizen. The other component I would like to speak about briefly relates to keeping our business to ourselves. And that's why in the discussion last time, and I apologize for being behind the curve on that, but it's important that we have our records under our control. Just by way of an example that's happened over the years in our system of service, for many years ago, the Department of Human Resources had 16,000 employees, included mental health, public health, vocational rehabilitation, DFACS, child support, et cetera. Over the years, a lot of those entities have deliberately carved themselves out of the department. As that goes on, we are departmental employees. If anything major like that happened, we would have to think very carefully about what we felt like was in the interest of our association, the people we serve, and that business really should be ours. And so I think our records should be within the association's infrastructure and not on departmental servers. I'm only aware of one instance going back to 1969 where someone in our system of service got in trouble. Back in, I think, about 1972, the DHR commissioner was in the paper saying that that they're going to eliminate all county departments and consolidate operations into one seamless entity on a regional level. Our president then wrote to the governor, and then the next day in the paper, the commissioner was in the paper saying, well, that was a premature announcement and it was a mistake. There were some consequences for that individual reaching out to the governor outside of the lines of authority. But generally, the work that we do is understood by departmental leadership. It is supported, but our records and our deliberations need to be under our control. And so we'll be working. I see a point on the agenda later to talk about creating a Sharepoint Group, and so like that. So long story short, don't use state time or equipment. The few times I'm aware of that happened, it surfaced on the floor of the General Assembly. The other big don't is to do not reflect discredit on the Department of Human Services or DFACS. We're best served politically by presenting a positive attitude in every regard. But if you reflect discredit on the department by saying that the commissioner is a fool. We really should not be doing this, that this is a gross waste of taxpayer money to be doing in a public setting. That goes contrary to supporting the department and creating a positive image. You can have any opinion that you want, you can express it privately, but if it gets out into a public forum, you're reflecting discredit in the department, and there are rules in the personnel manual about that. So, short summary, we have a lot of latitude and an obligation as professionals to do this work that we're doing to make a better system of service. There are a few lines that we don't cross, and we would like to keep our business internal to the association. So.
Thank you, Wayne.
Appreciate you sharing that, Mr. Drummond, because we actually had several incidences that happened in Region 1 as of April of this past year, where we had employees that reached out directly to state legislators using their state issued computers. So that was fun times here.
Yeah, it's just not our job. The department has folks that represent us, and we have a right as citizens to express ourselves, but that right does not include using state time and equipment to do that when we're paid to do something else. And it's always, thank you, Danny, for sharing that, because it's always good to know that there are current issues that are ongoing, a lot of which we're not aware of, that get occur on a daily basis. So.
Right.
We try not to mess things up all the time.
I'm amazed by the great work that everybody does, and but anytime we send out a call to action to reach out to your legislators, we started out by a couple of bits of advice to be brief, be sincere, and then be gone, get out of their way, but also to make sure that we do not cross those lines to get ourselves into trouble. So it requires constant vigilance and attention.
You know, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a refresher across the agency. I mean, I know that, you know, we're in GPHSA, we're talking in the legislative committee group. However, it does need to be more widespread, because maybe the people that Danny were mentioning were not even affiliated with GPHSA and didn't know any better or something.
They were not.
So I'll reach out to my regional director and see if we want to just reiterate that, because you know, with all the political things and unrest that's going on, chances are there are people hurt on either side and may be reaching out. So we need to make sure that we're covering our bases as an agency and protecting our integrity. So I will reach out to Jennifer on that.
And we may want to consider also, since we have a session starting up, a new session, as we particularly maybe perhaps when we share our goals and priorities and finalize those, that we sort of reiterate the do's and don'ts to all of our members, just as a matter of ongoing education, and that can be done fairly succinctly. So it's something that requires regular attending.
Vicki, just to give you a little snapshot, the two pressing agenda, two issues that caused the conversations. One of them was the discussion that really was not, if y'all remember earlier in April, there were some significant conversations around the budget and budget cuts, and there were conversations about possible office mergers. And so that was internal discussions that legislators were not even aware of. So that's really created, obviously it can create a mountain. So
yeah, Pandora's box was open, I'm sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay.
Not to mention the global pandemic, you factor that in with the panic of everybody. The intent obviously wasn't malicious. It was to advocate for counties.
Right, right.
But, you know, obviously the overarching thing was they used that platform that shouldn't have been used. Mr. Drummond, I believe if I understood him, they could have easily called their legislator.
Yeah, they could have done it as a
conversation
person.
with him or emailed them from their personal email address.
Yes.
But to use, when I get forwarded an email from a legislator that uses our DFAX letterhead, that's not a good, not a good start.
No, it's not. Okay. We will address that for sure. Thank you, Danny. Okay, so Wayne, do you have anything else on your follow-ups before we turn it over to Susan for her updates?
No, thank you.
Okay, Miss Susan.
Hey, everybody. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Hey, Happy New Year.
I do not have a lot of updates. I'll tell you what I've been doing. Some of it's just administrative, like registering the lobbyist paperwork, which Wayne had to assist me with several times. So thank goodness for Wayne. And I've also just been going through some back channels, just people that I know, just asking about what they feel will be, what the division will be interested in proposing during the session. What do they feel has any real chance of getting some serious consideration? Now, I certainly don't have the history that this group has with many of these items, but so far it sounds very consistent with what we've been talking about, that former House Bill 555, which would get a new name, new title, new name, new reference this session, seems to be, and Wayne, I should have asked you about this before I say this to the committee, so you're going to probably need to clean up anything that I say that's not correct. But from what my understanding is that the division was hoping that it would be included in the governor's agenda, and it appears that that is the case. And so that would, of course, add the case managers to the list of persons who only certain people can, I think it's just Superior Court judges, Wayne, is that right? Who could issue an order of arrest. Clean up everything that I just screwed up, Wayne. But you probably want to do it when you're not on mute.
Now, we'll try that again. I think everything was just fine and appropriate. We're much better served having the governor's support behind the legislation, and very encouraged by that. The only, I think the state courts also have resources, and that's why it's so important that actions that may consider the arrest of somebody who is doing their job under the authority of the juvenile court be considered in a court that has the resources to investigate it. The magistrate's court has no such resources, and they have no choice but to issue that pre-warrant arrest notice. But the state court also could come to play in that regard. But the main thing is, we want, if somebody wants to allege we're not doing our job in court, it needs to be in a court where they've got the resources and the time to explore that before filing any kind of legal action or summons.
So that is, thank you for that clarity. Long story short, I think that what was something that last year was almost passed and we were very vested in will be part of the governor's agenda to some degree. And so that gives it, like Wayne said, a lot more probability of being passed this session. We will just begin to have our weekly meetings with Voices, which is where we get a good bit of information. This coming up week, I believe they're hoping to schedule it. It may be one more week out after that. The legislative representation for DHS and DFAX, we've spoken a couple of times and just have agreed to regularly touch base to make sure we're all on the same page. That's working fine. I know them very well and feel fortunate too. So we have an easy relationship, and I think can communicate well in a real hassle-free way. So I'm looking forward to that. Otherwise, I don't really have an update until we kind of get more into the meat of things, because, you know, between me and you and the 15 people on this call, I don't really know what I'm doing. So Wayne is helping me.
Well, we're just all in it together, Susan. We'll all learn as we go. So it's part of the process. I didn't know anything about it when I started either, and I'm not even scratching the surface. So a lot to learn, but it's very interesting. It's very important, and so we're just focusing our energy on trying to make this legislative session make sure we're on top of everything that's going on and that we represent our agency well. So thank you. Okay, Mr. Wayne, we need some updates from you regarding 3 other things. Legislative reception. Tell everybody how that's going.
It's very interesting. The speaker put out a memo to House members and all House staff, and they're going to be greatly restricting any kind of access to the Capitol. Our colleagues in the Retirees Association have always planned an event, and so they've done some outreach to folks in the governor's office about the use of the Capitol for what we were envisioning. And the only space they're allocating for use at the Capitol for any outside event is outside in Liberty Square. Because of COVID restrictions, et cetera. The other option is to find an individual legislator who would be willing to schedule space in the Coverdale Legislative Office building and to be, quote, a sponsor of an event. And so the event planner for GSRA has reached out to Darlene Taylor, who is a former DFACS board member in Thomas County, who's a representative from Thomas, to ask if she'd be willing to consider reserving space at Coverdale for an event, and probably lunch type thing for focusing on the retirement committees and focusing on the human services component of the appropriations committees, to invite them and their staff to pick up a boxed lunch that we provide for them as a way of giving ourselves some visibility. The meeting rooms in Coverdale are really not amenable for lunches, but that would be what we're presently looking at. Some of the implications for us are one, that we would be canceling the agreement, which I probably will do in the next day or so with regardless, with stately events or whatever their current distinctive capital caterers. They change their names periodically. That will result in the forfeiting of our $750 deposit. But we've been aware of that. Really pleased with the support that we got in terms of pledges from members to support this event. And I'm probably going to do a re-solicitation for that to help build our capacity to serve as full partners. We also have SMI, our good and faithful friends in the corporate sector, have agreed to sponsor us at a rate of $1,000. And our Retirees Association has always been kind to put in $500 of their money in the retiree auxiliary to support our efforts as well. So I think we're on task to continue to explore whether an event is feasible. We probably change the focus of the event to be more specifically doing outreach to committees that touch our work most directly, and then see if that's going to be tenable. Right now, I remain optimistic, but it is a work in progress.
Thank you, Wayne. So do we have any pre-filed legislation that has surfaced since we last checked?
Not of consequence. I did go back through all of the pre-filed legislation, and and it occurred to me as I was doing so that the process of giving a bill a number is on its own thing. So you really have to start over from the beginning and be sure you look through all of them. As of yesterday, I did not see any direct bill that has a chance of moving anywhere that has any consequence for our business. I'll continue to try to check that every couple of days. I let both Vicki and Gretchen, our chairs, know that I had done that. When the other commitment to hold me on task, as I look for first readers that are dropped, I'm going to report to them by email that I've done my job every day. And if I fail to do so, they are empowered to jerk a knot in me to make sure that we stay on top of that, because that's first indication when they drop a bill that's of importance. We'll identify it, get it out to our expert readers, and make sure that it's there real clearly, but nothing there yet.
Okay, great, thank you. And then the last thing on the update that I had was last month we talked about, I had set up a Sharepoint group for all the legislative committee members and where we could put documents out there and so forth and so on. And we talked about it needed to be on the GPHSA servers and stuff. So Wayne and Rhonda and myself are going to work on getting that created via GPHSA and their programs, their software, and create the SharePoint so that it's all in one place. They have control of the documents, just as Wayne was talking about, how they need to be the keeper of all the information. For history purposes, it's just a cleaner cut. We need to make sure that we give them everything. So once we have that set up, you'll be notified and you'll have a link that you will go to see any documents we've posted. And for the content experts, when there is legislation for you to review, it will be out there. We can collaborate. We can combine notes and have everything ready to figure out how we want to position ourselves, whether we need to lobby for opposition or for support or to monitor and just to watch it. So stay tuned for that. We'll give an update next month how that's going. If you don't have an email or notification before then, that it's set up and ready to go. So, all right. Well, that's all I had as far as the agenda. I'm going to open the floor up for any questions, any comments, concerns, feedback, discussion. If anybody has anything, this is the time to go ahead, Miss Susan.
I forgot to mention that I worked on the 2021 legislative goals and priorities, and I will send that to this group if that's appropriate, Wayne, before it goes to the board for approval. I will just let you know that I tried to include language that was broad enough that as things came up, they would fit into one of our goal categories, like if anything comes up about workplace conditions and the safety of our staff as it relates to kind of moving through the hopeful end of this pandemic, the language is broad enough to say our goal is always going to be to promote the safety of our staff in workplace processes, that sort of thing. Also, the conversation around workload standards, there was some really good language there before. And what I tried to do was incorporate not only the benefit to the staff, but how having workplace standards in place will promote many of the things we are looking to do, such as equitable pay, reasonable caseload sizes, and that those things ultimately benefit the families that we serve and save taxpayer dollars by addressing attrition and that sort of thing, performance. And so It's, I'll send that out as soon as we're finished with this. I forgot to mention it earlier.
Okay, thank you.
Basically, if you have input or feedback, if you will, send it back directly to Susan. And after a few days, when we believe that that it's in final form, we can send it through our committee chairs to the committee and ask that you vote to adopt the goals, and then we can have them presented to the board. So that's sort of our housekeeping way of advancing this. I had a chance to look at Susan's work this morning. I've written our goals and priorities, at least the initial draft, since the early 90s. I was very humbled and impressed by your excellent work. It's framed very, very well, and I think it'll give us some good general guidance as we approach the session. So thanks for the hard work on that. If you have feedback, send it directly to Susan, and then once we believe it's suitable, we'll get it out for a vote to the committee.
Is there a deadline that we have to have this to the board?
No, it would be good to probably resolve that in the next week to 10 days. There have been years where we didn't formally adopt things and just assumed that the prior goals and priorities would cover us. But generally, it's good form to have it to them. And if we get it to the board, I would recommend before the next board meeting and probably before the 15th. It just is a good working deadline.
Okay. Anyone else have anything?
Vicky, I apologize for being late on the call. So
There's Miss Gretchen.
How you doing, darling? Happy New Year, everyone. But I missed the first item, the GSU study. If I could get someone to speak about that one item, I'd greatly appreciate it.
It's good to hear from you. Briefly, we asked that our social services committee look at that study. I think it's important to understand the comprehensive nature of the study, and also for them to do some work to look at what we're doing in current practice, and then to identify any opportunity that they saw in there of comparing the study and comparing current practice that may warrant legislative response. And if so, to refer it back to the legislative committee.
Thank you, Wayne.
Oh, no, thank you. It was we need people to raise issues, to raise concerns, and we also need to sort of work them through our systems to make sure that that the people who are doing our social services work and working on those issues can give us some feedback and input. And it seemed a good way of getting that to move ahead deliberately.
Thank you.
Gretchen, we also voted to put you in charge of that committee. So good luck with that.
Congratulations.
I think I was mistaken.
I thought fast enough, but thank you, Danny. I appreciate that very much. And Happy New Year to you.
Good to see you, Gretchen.
Actually, Gretchen was already on top of it. She's the one that reached out to the social services chairperson, the committee chairperson, and has got that ball rolling. So kudos to Miss Gretchen, my co-host, my co-committee chairperson of this fantabulous committee.
Behind the scenes.
So anybody else have anything? Gretchen, you have anything you want to share or say?
No, I appreciate everything that everybody's doing. And thank you, Susan, so much for what you've started to do, because we weren't sure about the goals and priorities or whatever. So that's great. I just wanted to ask, since Wayne is saying that we need to have this presented at least by the 15th, then is there like what time frame do we need to send our feedback back to Susan?
I was going to request it by the 12th. That will give me a minute. I mean, I can get it finished that day and then get it back to you all to share before the 15th, if that will work.
I think that's fine. Vicky, what do you think, Wayne? Committee,
Sounds
other
good.
people? Okay, yeah, that's great.
I think that's fine because it's not lengthy, is it? I mean, it's just like some bullet points of what we plan to achieve this year, right? I mean, it's not like it's a 45-page document that you have to take
not,
hours
and
reading. So
it
it
is-
should be easy to review and provide feedback pretty quickly, I would think. So
I think so. It's broad. So if I were you, when you're looking at it, try to just think about any specific issue you think could come up and make sure you feel like it would fit under what are sort of umbrella goals, because there's nothing separate and specific that we are seeking. Most of what we are looking to do is around the workload standards. And so the majority of it is explaining that, kind of tethering that out a little bit to explain why they're important. I don't think I just want to make sure that whatever we feel may come up, we could say, yes, that's something that we work on as an organization and as an entity, and it fits in here. So if you can kind of look at it, not technically so much as, is this broad enough to cover the work that we do? If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay. And Lydia has a question that she has posted here.
I've already asked. Thank you, Vicki.
Okay.
Susan, thank you.
Looks like Keith has a question though.
Keith does,
still has a
yes.
question.
In looking at Keith's question, I do think one of the emphases in the goals and priorities that Susan developed was focused on safety of staff in every regard, and I do think that that gives us some broader language to focus on the safety of our folks in doing this work. We normally don't get into very detailed specifics, and in looking at the question, I don't know that we have specific things related to addressing personal issues related to daycare and other things in the goals and priorities, and we would probably need a way of quantifying those in some more detail. I think it's a common issue for everyone in our society. But I do think the concerns about staff safety as it relates to both COVID and also related to public safety matters are always paramount, and there is some broad guidance in what's drafted to address that. I don't know beyond that what other cost we could consider covering, but that's something that I think is more for the group to think about.
Okay. Any other questions in the chat box, or anyone have a question or comment?
When is our next meeting?
Our next meeting is February the 3rd at 1 o'clock. It's going to be the first Wednesday of every month at 1 o'clock. And I will send out a reminder. Now, Rhonda, when you send out, did you do the recurring?
I did, yes.
Okay, so I can go in there and maybe forward that. I need to think about how I can forward the recurring. Or is it showing up on your calendars? Let me
Mine
research.
showed up on my calendar.
Okay, so it's showing every month. Okay, let me research that and make sure that everybody's got that.
Vicki, one
yeah,
thing
it'll
you may be able to do is set up a recurring, just set up a calendar appointment that is recurring, and then copy and paste the Zoom invitation into the body, since it won't change, and then it should automatically populate.
Okay, I can do that. All right. Anything else? Well, we have had some very good conversation, and I want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy days. happy new year, happy first hump day of 2021, and may this year be wonderful. So our contact information, mine and Gretchen's, are on the screen there. If you have any questions or you need anything, of course, you can always reach out to Wayne or Miss Susan. We're happy to answer your questions or take feedback. So thank you so much for your participation, your engagement. We can't do this without you. And unless anybody has anything else, that's a wrap. That's all I have for this month's meeting. Anything else? Going once, going twice. All right. Well, y'all have a great rest of your afternoon, and thanks again for being with us.
Thank
We'll see
you.
you
Thank
on
you.
February 3rd at 1 o'clock.
Okay, bye,
thanks.
everybody.
Bye-bye.